They wrote my obituary before I ever stopped breathing. My own son and his wife planned the perfect ending: a quiet cabin, a forged signature, and a fake accident that would leave them $1.5 million richer. But what they didn't know is that I was listening, and I wasn't ready to die. If you're watching this, don't scroll away, because this story, my story, might just remind you that silence isn't surrender, and survival isn't weakness. Hit that subscribe button if you believe women like me deserve to be heard. Drop a comment if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or erased. Share this story with a friend, a daughter, a mother. Because the more we speak, the less they can bury the truth. I found my own obituary on their computer. There it was. Margaret Louise Lacey, 68, passed away peacefully in her sleep on November 4th, 2024. It even listed the funeral home, the type of casket, my favorite hymn. I hadn't died. I wasn't even sick. I had just gone into the office to refill the paper tray in the printer. Stacy, the daughter-in-law I once trusted with my spare house key, left her laptop open. The screen had dimmed but not locked, and that's when I saw the file, Obituary Margaret Final Draft, PDF. Out of curiosity, I clicked, and everything I thought I knew about my family shattered in that single second. The words were written with a kind of finality. Not if I died, but when. The date was less than a week away. At first I told myself there had to be some mistake. Maybe it was for a different Margaret. Maybe it was some kind of morbid writing exercise. But the moment I read survived by her only son Derek and his beloved wife Stacy, I knew this wasn't hypothetical. This was planned, calculated, premeditated, and they were waiting for it to happen. I remember just standing there, not breathing, not blinking. I had been a nurse for 41 years. I'd watched people take their last breath. I'd helped families grieve, plan funerals, write obituaries, but never, not once, did I imagine I'd read my own. My hands were trembling as I closed the file and stepped away from the laptop. I could hear Stacy humming in the kitchen downstairs. Something light, something sweet. She had just made me peppermint tea, my favorite. She said it would help me sleep. I didn't drink it. Instead, I stood in the hallway like a ghost, listening, watching shadows shift under the doorways. I had spent the last 8 months trying not to be a burden, trying to stay quiet, helpful, invisible. I did the laundry. I baked banana bread. I ironed Derek's shirts the way I used to when he was a teenager getting ready for high school debates. But now I realized they weren't caring for me. They were preparing me to die. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront them right there. But something inside me, some quiet, ancient instinct told me to wait, to breathe, to watch. Because if they were already writing my ending, then I had better start rewriting my beginning. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone else hold the pen. After I found my own obituary, everything I thought I knew about my life, about my family, suddenly felt like wallpaper peeling off the wall. The kind you don't notice until it curls at the edge, and then you realize the whole room is rotting underneath. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed fully clothed with my glasses still on and my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me and tried to trace the steps that led me here. Not here physically, but here emotionally. How did I become a woman waiting to die quietly in the spare room of her only son's home? 8 months ago, Derek had convinced me to move in with him and Stacy. "Come stay with us, Ma," he said on the phone. "You've done enough. No more bills, no more yard work. Just rest. Let us take care of you now." It sounded loving. I had just sold the house after my hip surgery. The place felt too big, too quiet, too filled with shadows of my late husband. I thought Derek was trying to help. I believed that. God help me, I wanted to believe that. When I moved in, everything felt polite, if not warm. Stacy gave me a fresh set of towels and an electric blanket. Derek helped carry my boxes. They set me up in the guest room. No window, no closet, but temporary, they said. I didn't complain, but the shift came faster than I was willing to admit. They started locking the fridge at night, said it was for my safety after I woke up once for a glass of milk. Stacy swapped out all my medications for pre-sorted blister packs that I wasn't allowed to touch. My phone charger vanished, my mail stopped arriving. And the hardest part, they did it all with smiles. "Oh, we're just looking out for you," Ma Derek would say, patting my hand like I was 5 years old and losing teeth. But deep down, I started to feel it. That cold, sinking sensation that you're no longer welcome, just tolerated. Like leftover casserole after a holiday kept for a while but destined for the trash. I became invisible in my own life. They had friends over for dinner, but I wasn't invited to the table. I'd find my plate in the microwave afterward, covered in plastic wrap like a sad afterthought. And then came the doctor's appointments I wasn't allowed to attend. "Don't worry, Ma. We spoke to the doctor on your behalf. You've been forgetful lately. He just wants you to rest more." Forgetful. I had been a trauma nurse for 4 decades. I could insert an IV blindfolded in the back of a moving ambulance. I kept people alive when machines failed, and now they were telling me I couldn't handle my own prescriptions. One afternoon, I overheard Stacy on the phone. She was pacing the hallway outside my door, whispering, "We're trying to get everything settled before the holidays. I mean, she's fading fast. The life insurance is in place. We just need the last signature for power of attorney." I stopped breathing. They weren't helping me. They were erasing me. I sat there in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to warn me. I realized I wasn't safe here. Not emotionally, not financially, not even physically. And yet, I didn't leave. Not yet. Because now I knew something they didn't know I knew. And that was power. Maybe not the kind of power I used to have in a hospital or a courtroom, but the kind of quiet, steady strength that builds when a woman's been pushed too far and finally decides she's done being polite. They thought I was dying, but I was just starting to wake up. Once you realize someone wants you dead, your eyes adjust. You start seeing the little things. You start listening to the silences between their words. And everything you thought was normal begins to look like a trap you almost stepped into. I didn't confront Derek or Stacy, not yet. I couldn't afford a single misstep. Instead, I started to notice. The pills, for one. The little blue ones in the blister pack. I wasn't stupid, I never took them. I'd been slipping them into a planter by the kitchen window for weeks. But one day, curiosity got the better of me. I crushed one up and put it under my old nurse's magnifier. It didn't match anything I'd ever administered. I searched the name online. It wasn't even FDA approved. That same night, I waited until they went to bed and crept into the kitchen. I opened the trash, gently digging past wrappers and coffee grounds until I found what I was looking for, the prescription bag. The pharmacy wasn't local. It was in a town 3 hours away, and the name printed on the label, not mine. Not even Derek's. It was registered to a woman named Sarah Delaney. But the birth date matched mine exactly. They weren't just drugging me. They were fabricating medical records. And it got worse. I started keeping track of little changes. The mailbox key had been removed from my keyring. My bank app suddenly required a new password. My Medicare statement listed a provider I'd never seen, Dr. R. Clifton, who apparently had diagnosed me with early-stage cognitive decline. I never met that man in my life. One morning, while Derek was out and Stacy was taking a shower, I sneaked into the office again. This time, I plugged in a USB drive I had hidden in my bra. My hands were shaking, but I moved quickly. I opened her email. The first message I saw was from a law firm. Subject, durable power of attorney, final draft. My name was all over it, signed, initialed, except I never touched that paper. They had forged my signature. But what stopped my breath cold was a folder on the desktop titled Estate Plan, Final Phase. Inside were spreadsheets, asset breakdowns, projected dates, notes on probate delay strategies. And at the very bottom, a schedule labeled November 4th confirmed travel window, destination Lake House property, Flathead, Lake Montana. Just below it, remote, no neighbors for 2 miles. GPS logs off 1.2 mi from cabin. Clean. It read like something out of a Netflix crime doc. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I was the woman they were planning to quietly disappear. That night, I sat in the bathtub with the door locked, staring at the faucet while the water went cold. I wasn't crying. I couldn't cry anymore. What I felt was colder than fear, heavier than anger. It was clarity. They were going to kill me. They didn't need a bomb or a gun or a break-in. No, they had something worse access. They had my pills, my food, my documents, my trust. But I had something too knowledge, and that was the only weapon I needed. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I smiled when Stacy brought me scrambled eggs. I thanked Derek when he checked the thermostat. I even complimented the new throw pillows on the couch. Meanwhile, I began collecting. I printed out emails. I photographed documents with my phone in the bathroom mirror. I took screenshots and sent them to an old email I hadn't touched in years. And I called one person I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, Janine Brooks, a former neighbor, and now an investigative reporter for a local station in Boise. We weren't exactly close, but she had once told me after I patched up her kid's broken arm, "If you ever need me for anything, you call." So I did. Her voice was cautious, but curious. "Maggie, what's going on?" I took a shaky breath. "They're planning to kill me. And I have proof." Silence. "Then I'll be there in the morning." I hung up, then erased the call from the log. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the windows, I thought about all the women like me. Women who gave up their homes, their independence, their privacy for family, and what they got in return was silence, confinement, control. But I wasn't going to be another statistic. I was going to be the woman who lived, and I was going to make damn sure they remembered it. After the call with Janine, I didn't feel safer, only more alert. I wasn't out of danger. I was still sleeping in a house where the people under the same roof were rehearsing my death. Every sound became sharper. The click of the hallway light, the whisper of text messages behind a closed door, even the way Stacy stirred my tea, too slow, too careful. I started pretending to be more confused. I'd pause mid-sentence, forget people's names, stare blankly at the TV when it was off. I let my posture slump, shuffled when I walked, and laughed at the wrong moments. I made myself into the woman they needed me to be, just long enough for them to believe I was slipping. And they did. I overheard Stacy one morning say to Derek in the kitchen, "She's getting worse. Honestly, I'm surprised she still remembers her own name." Derek chuckled. "Good. It'll make it easier." I kept stirring my oatmeal in the next room slowly, silently, and filed that sentence away like a bullet. Janine arrived 2 days later, dressed in a tan coat and sunglasses like she was on her way to brunch, not a crime scene. She didn't knock right away. She rang the doorbell, then dropped her phone like she'd been texting and picked it up with both hands, using the moment to snap 2 quick pictures through the window. Smart girl. I opened the door and smiled. "Janine." "My God, it's been forever," I said a little louder than needed. "Margaret, I was just in the neighborhood. Hope it's not a bad time," she said with a grin like we were catching up over coffee. Stacy appeared behind me, lips tight. "Everything okay?" "Oh yes," I said quickly. "Just an old friend. We'll sit on the porch." We did. And for 15 minutes we talked about flowers and weather and old church ladies who used to wear too much perfume. But every few seconds, Janine slid a folded paper into my coat pocket or angled her lapel toward my voice. Her phone was recording every word. When she left, she hugged me tight and whispered into my ear, "Don't eat or drink anything you didn't make yourself. I've got you." I nodded. The next few days were a blur of performance. I began recording everything, tucking the phone under pillows and coffee mugs inside the lining of my knitting bag. I started calling a former colleague of mine from the hospital, Linda. She was a retired RN and still had access to the medical board registry. I gave her the name of Dr. R. Clifton. She called back a day later. "Maggie, that man lost his license 6 years ago. He's not a doctor anymore, so they'd even forged a fake medical professional for the records. I shouldn't have been shocked, but it still chilled me. I dug deeper. One afternoon while Stacy was taking a nap and Derek had gone to get the car serviced, I went into the attic. I don't know why. Maybe I was just looking for proof that I existed before they started erasing me. But instead, I found a box labeled property records. Inside were copies of the house deed with my signature removed and a new notarized version listing Derek as the sole owner. The date. Just 3 weeks after I moved in, they had taken everything, not just the home, my identity, my dignity, my autonomy, and yet they smiled at me over dinner. Derek passed the green beans like we weren't planning a murder. Stacy complimented my cardigan and offered me more mashed potatoes. It was the ultimate insult, not just the betrayal, but the performance of love. I knew then I wasn't living with my family. I was living with actors in a stage play I didn't audition for, a play where I was the final act. But I had one scene left to write. The next morning, I made myself a real cup of coffee, black strong, just the way I used to have it, before they switched me to low-acid herbal blends without asking. I sat at the kitchen table with my old leather address book. It had dust on it, smelled like cedar, and the pages curled like the edges of my memory. I flipped to the E's. Ellen Hartley, retired attorney, my late husband's legal counsel, and the godmother to our son. We hadn't spoken in years. I dialed the number. "Hello, Ellen. It's Margaret. I need help." She didn't ask why. She said, "Come to my office. 1 hour." I told Derek I had a doctor's appointment. He barely looked up from his phone. I met Ellen in a small office above a hardware store. She looked exactly the same, gray bun-thick glasses and a gaze that could cut glass. When I handed her the envelope of documents, recordings, and fake signatures, she didn't flinch. She read like a machine, nodding at each page. Finally, she looked up. "You understand they're committing felony fraud, right? This is attempted murder." "I do," I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "Do you want to press charges? Now?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to finish the trap." She smiled then, and it wasn't kind. It was proud. Together we made a plan. She would secure my assets, file the paperwork, to reverse the forged deed, freeze the life insurance payout, and prepare an affidavit to invalidate the power of attorney. We'd time everything. And I would stay in the role. A little longer. Old, fragile, confused. Just enough for them to believe I was on the edge of forgetting my own name. Because the second they stopped watching was the second I'd walk out the door and take their whole plan down with me. 3 days after I met with Ellen, Derek walked into the kitchen with a smile too wide for a Tuesday morning. "Hey, Ma," he said, almost chipper. "Stacy and I were talking. Thought it might be nice to get away for the weekend. Fresh air, change of scenery. What do you say I set down my coffee, careful not to blink too fast? Oh, where to Flathead Lake, the old family cabin. Thought it'd be good for you, restful, quiet. Flathead Lake, Montana. The same destination listed in their estate plan folder. The place with no neighbors for 2 miles. Where GPS drops off. Where a woman could fall asleep and never wake up and no one would know for days. But I didn't flinch. I nodded like he'd just offered me a spa retreat. "That sounds lovely," I said and smiled. That night I packed one small overnight bag, just enough to avoid suspicion. Toothbrush, a flannel shirt, my late husband's watch. I tucked the micro recorder Ellen gave me into my bra and slid a burner phone into my sock. I didn't bring anything I couldn't afford to leave behind because I wasn't planning to come back here. By Friday morning, the 3 of us were in Derek's Subaru heading north on I-90, the sky overcast and heavy with late autumn weight. Stacy played her relaxing road trip playlist, soft acoustic songs with too many open chords, and passed me a bottle of water laced with a dissolving capsule I had pretended to swallow for months. I smiled, drank nothing, and stared out the window like a woman halfway gone. They talked like I wasn't there. About groceries, renovations, money. At one point, Stacy mentioned selling the Subaru. "When this is over," she said, "I think we should trade it in. Something newer, something cleaner. When this is over." That sentence echoed in my chest like a countdown. We pulled into the driveway just before dusk. The cabin looked the same, weathered, wooden, a little crooked. But where I saw memories, cracked window panes, my husband's old fishing boots still by the porch, they saw opportunity, isolation, a perfect place to vanish someone. Inside, the heater had already been turned on. The table was set. My favorite quilt lay folded at the foot of the bed. They had prepared it. Prepared me. That night, Derek made stew. Stacy poured wine. They insisted I eat a full bowl, said I looked pale, tired, thinner. "You really should get some rest," Ma Derek said softly, watching me over his spoon. "I will," I murmured. It's so peaceful out here." They cleaned up dinner. I excused myself early. In the bedroom, I locked the door, turned off the lights, and waited. At exactly 11:42 p.m., I heard the knob turn, then a whisper. "She's asleep." The door opened. I didn't move. Stacy tiptoed in. I felt rather than saw her silhouette lean over me. Her hand brushed against my cheek. "She's cold already," she said, voice low, satisfied. "She took the meds," Derek whispered from the hallway. "Yeah, lights out." They left. I stayed still for 3 more minutes. Then I got up. Out back, I moved quickly. The night air bit through my coat. I didn't care. I followed the route Janine and I had mapped out, a dirt path behind the cabin leading to the edge of the woods where GPS finally kicked back in. I sent a single text from the burner phone, "Leaving." Recording secured, cabin location pinned. Janine had people on standby. Ellen had already filed emergency motions. The authorities were briefed. This was no longer just a story. It was evidence. I walked for 20 minutes until I reached a nearby ranger's shed we had scoped out weeks earlier. Behind it, hidden in a rusted mailbox, no one used anymore, was a key. I let myself in, locked the door, and waited in the dark, clutching my recorder like a compass. It was done. I was out. And they had no idea. The next morning, I watched through the cracked window as 2 state patrol SUVs arrived at the cabin just after sunrise. A third car followed a federal vehicle. From where I stood, I saw Derek stumble out of the cabin in pajama pants, rubbing his eyes. Stacy stood behind him in a robe, barefoot and confused. They weren't arrested that morning, but they were questioned, and they knew somehow the story had turned. I left Montana that afternoon under a different name. Janine booked the tickets. Ellen had secured a safe house. No headlines yet, just whispers. Just legal motions quietly exploding behind the scenes. Back in Idaho, the sheriff's office opened an investigation. Stacy's emails were subpoenaed. Derek's online search history. Can you legally declare someone incompetent without them knowing? How long do sedatives stay in the bloodstream? Inheritance taxes timeline told its own story. Ellen filed for immediate revocation of power of attorney. She froze the life insurance policy. The forged signatures were authenticated and rejected. They weren't just losing me, they were about to lose everything. And me, I sat in a sunlit room with yellow curtains and watched it unfold. Not with vengeance, not with rage, but with peace. Because they had written my obituary. They thought they had planned my end. But what they never expected was that I'd write the final chapter myself. It didn't happen all at once. Justice never does. It's not a loud bang or a heroic takedown in the middle of the night. It's a knock at the door, a folder being opened, a signature being questioned. A voice on tape played back slowly, deliberately. But when it arrives, it is unmistakable. 10 days after I left that cabin, the sheriff's department executed a search warrant on Derek and Stacy's home. They weren't there. They were at brunch. French toast and mimosas, I would later learn. Laughing, relaxed, completely unaware their world was collapsing. By the time they got home, the locks had been changed and their devices were gone, confiscated by a task force that included 2 agents from the Department of Justice and a white-collar crimes investigator from Boise. Ellen had moved fast, faster than they ever thought I could. Within 48 hours, Derek was charged with felony fraud conspiracy to commit elder abuse and attempted unlawful transfer of assets. Stacy faced conspiracy, forgery, insurance fraud, and reckless endangerment. The media caught the story like wildfire. Son and daughter-in-law accused of plotting mother's death for $1.5 million payout. The headlines were brutal. The comment sections were worse. And I watched it all from a quiet house near Sandpoint where Ellen kept me safe, and Janine brought me coffee every morning like I was her grandmother. I didn't speak to reporters. I didn't answer calls. I didn't give interviews. I just watched one piece at a time as the lie they built crumbled beneath their feet. The trial came faster than anyone expected. Thanks to the recordings, the documents, and the digital footprint they left behind like toddlers in wet cement, there wasn't much room for legal gymnastics. Their defense team tried to spin it. Margaret is elderly. She misunderstood. These were financial misunderstandings, not malice. But then the prosecution played the tape. Stacy's voice low and cruel, saying, "She's cold already." Derek's reply, "Good, it'll make it easier." The courtroom went silent. I sat in the front row next to Ellen. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, but my spine was straight. My clothes were simple black dress, pearl earrings, flats I could stand in for hours. I didn't come to cry. I came to be seen. They didn't look at me, not once, not when the photos of the fake documents were displayed, not when the pharmacist testified that Stacy had picked up a sedative prescription under a false name, not even when Janine took the stand and confirmed my voice in the recording, the emails, the pattern of digital abuse. But I looked at them, not with hate, with recognition, because I finally saw them not as family, but as strangers who wore my son's smile and sat in my kitchen plotting my disappearance like it was some kind of home improvement project. On the final day of the trial, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Lacey, would you like to make a statement?" I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my voice did not. I walked to the witness stand. The room was so still I could hear someone in the back row breathing. I looked at Derek, at Stacy, and then I said, "You thought I was weak. You thought I was tired. You thought I was too old to see clearly, too slow to react, too scared to speak. But I wasn't any of those things. I was quiet, not blind. I was grieving, not gone. You wrote my obituary before I stopped breathing, and that was your first mistake because I'm still here, and you'll be remembered not for what you tried to do, but for the fact that you failed." I turned and walked back to my seat. Not a word from either of them. Not a tear, not an apology. Only silence. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. No bail, no bond. They were let out in handcuffs. Stacy cried then. But not for me, for herself. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to. I'd already gotten what I came for, the truth spoken aloud with the world listening. And that's more than most women like me ever get. You see, they wanted me quiet, dead in a cabin, forgotten, folded up in a fake memory they could control. But instead I stood in court and told my story. I turned my silence into evidence, my pain into proof. And now they live behind bars. And I live with the knowledge that I did not disappear. I didn't fade. I didn't fall. I fought. And I won. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, reminded you of someone you love or of yourself, please subscribe, share, or leave a comment. Because when women like us speak up, we don't just survive, we make sure no one else has to suffer in silence. We're not done yet, not by a long shot.